Good afternoon. My name is Susan Doyle and I will be your facilitator today on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. I would like to welcome you to this Lean Construction Ireland webinar presented by Ross O'Coleman, High-Tech Construction and Housing Manager with Enterprise Ireland. The title of this webinar is Built to Innovate, Enterprise Ireland's new mandate to work with domestic residential construction companies. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Ross after the presentation. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The speaker for today is Ross O'Coleman. Ross manages Enterprise Ireland's activities for the high-tech construction and housing sectors. He spent 10 years as part of Enterprise Ireland's overseas team, initially working on the Middle East desk in Dublin, before going on to manage EI offices in Toronto and New York. He's also worked for IDA Ireland and the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. A graduate of TCD and DCU, Ross lives in Dublin and enjoys spending time in the great outdoors with his two young children. Thanks a million, Ross, for the presentation today. I'll hand over to Ross to start the presentation.
Sure, thank you, Susan, for that introduction, and thank you to Lean Construction Ireland and indeed Derek Sinnott for facilitating this today. I think it's a very relevant agenda between ourselves of what we're trying to achieve under Built to Innovate and Lean Construction Ireland, and this was illustrated to me just recently, in fact. So we're planning some new marketing campaign to start on this initiative that I'm going to be talking about, and that's going to be kicking off in a couple of weeks' time. And we were sitting around as a team last week, playing around with some marketing ideas of what language we would use, because we wanted to try something a little bit more different and approachable, I think, for some of our home builders and general contractors. And one of the smarter people in the team, I suppose, came up with this idea. They said, what about build smarter, build faster, build leaner, built to innovate, as kind of like a tagline. And we all sort of went, oh, that sounds really nice. And then I noticed in preparing these slides that actually Lean Construction Ireland is better, faster together, which is not dissimilar. I think we are going with that language, Susan. So you can send me a solicitor's letter if I'm breaching some infringing some copyright or something there. But I think it does demonstrate that, look, what we're trying to achieve under this new mandate under Housing for All is really very well aligned with the objectives of Lean Construction Ireland. So that's why I just jumped at the opportunity to get involved in today, and hopefully again in the annual conference in a couple of months' time. So what I'm going to cover, I suppose, I'll start with just some building context information around where we're currently at in what Enterprise Ireland does traditionally for the construction industry, what we've been asked to do, and then what we've been doing. And really this is an opportunity for you to try to understand this new mandate and these new offers that Enterprise Ireland has for the industry. And hopefully for me, coming out of this, there's going to be new clients for Enterprise Ireland, or existing clients or consultants who have a better understanding of what we're trying to achieve, who we can hopefully work with. And I want to make new contacts and new friends out of this session. So please follow up with me afterwards as required. So look, to start with, what is our traditional activity that Enterprise Ireland is known for? So we work with construction products and services companies on their export agenda. That's what our mandate has been, and for the last 25 years, in fact. And when we're supporting companies, it's around that conversation of how does this support drive export growth, which will create employment in Ireland. That's what our mission is. And in the construction space, that has been really successful in the last few years, and it's primarily driven by very large contracts in high-tech construction going into the UK and Northern Europe particularly, and that's data centers, and lots of the people on the line here today would be familiar with that massive success story. And I think it's without doubt or modesty that we can say that Irish companies are best in the world at building that type of high-tech project at the moment. So we should be proud of what's been achieved by our companies to date. Some of the challenges that we're working on that traditional agenda include digitalization, sustainability, Industry 4.0, offsite is included in that, I think, as well. And they're the types of conversations we've been having with companies and building our developmental agenda with them. Okay. So going on to what we've been asked to do under Housing for All. And there's two clear actions where Enterprise Ireland has responsibility, and then there's another two or three other actions where we are also inputting and supporting. For example, there's one action around the promotion of modern methods of construction and a demonstrator park, so we're quite involved in that. But these two on the screen that you can see are really the two core ones that we've been operating on. And in reverse order, the technology centre, so that is an initiative that came out of the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform Construction Sector Working Group, which we're a part of. And that technology centre had been moving towards a launch before Housing for All, but when Housing for All came along, it certainly had an opinion on what the focus and the urgency of that centre would be. So the timelines have been massively accelerated around the delivery of that. It was announced in July that an NUIG-led consortium has won that tender, and that residential construction requirements is going to be a key focus for that technology centre, and really particularly in year one, we're going to have to get some quick wins from that team on the residential side. Then the second one, the expand agency mandate, that's what I'm going to be mostly talking about today. And essentially what we've been asked to do here is deliver funding packages to support innovation and productivity projects in the domestic residential sector. And as I said previously, or alluded to previously, in the past, Enterprise Ireland would not have supported a company on a domestic agenda. That was not within our mandate to do. So this is a fundamental change for Enterprise Ireland, and it's been really interesting for us, I'd have to say, as an agency, and quite an exciting project to lead out on for me as well, given it's a new area for us. Just going back to remind ourselves of what are the objectives under Housing for All. So there is 4 key pillars which are in that green circle on the right hand side, and it is everything from eradicating homelessness and supporting social inclusion through to getting new builds done, although certainly the new build numbers is very much the dominant metric that government are focused on. Last year the output was 20,500 or so, just from memory, and you can see the scheduled build out over the next 10 years that's required to meet the objectives of Housing for All. But typically you hear government talk about 33,000 new homes, so that's apartments and houses, and it actually is quite an apartment-led plan, but 33,000 new homes on average is the objective of it. From what I can see of the figures from the housing agency, it seemed to be fairly on course for the 24,500 for 2022, but certainly the figures continue to be demanding as we go forward. And given that these were figures that were launched in September 2021, and that was before obviously the awful war in Ukraine, which has had an impact across the world and every sector. So one of the considerations of the plan is that we're currently, to deliver that plan, and I should really quickly follow, to deliver that plan with current building methodologies. The expert group on future skill needs relevant to this has done some labour mapping. So at the moment, it's estimated that just over 40,000 people work in residential construction. And to deliver this plan by 2030 will require over 80,000. And I actually think the more eye-watering and scary figure is that 40 has to grow to 60 by 2024. And 2024 is beginning to feel like it's not that long away for us now as we head into the winter of 2022. So there's a huge requirement and a huge challenge around labour availability to try to meet this plan. And this is something, look, if talking to people from industry, this is no surprise for them today. It's already a huge struggle to get skills now, but that will be compounded by this initiative and also the natural retrofit and the wider national development plan. So there's really big demands coming down the tracks for us as a result of this investment. So if I was to be optimistic and just explain this a little bit further, well, first of all, I think our area of focus, if you look at the pie chart there, is what we call the hard construction costs. So that's the dark purple slice of the pie, which is 191,000. So the writing's tiny there, so I'll read it out. So it's the percentage breakdown of total development cost of a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay, and the total there from the Society of Chartered Surveyors is 411,000. That's their from 2021 figure survey, I believe. And of that, they've broken that down, and the hard construction costs are 191,000 of that, or 47%. The 3-bed semi number is actually remarkably similar. It's I think it's 49% is hard construction costs, and that's the area that we're going after with our supports. There's limited things that Enterprise Ireland as an agency can do around some of the other areas, such as site purchases or contributions or so on and so forth. There are other issues that are being tackled across government. But where I would point to, again, the optimist in me is looking at the labour productivity in our construction industry, and these are CSO figures, and again, people are probably familiar with them, but there was a recent report released actually which showed an uptick in gross value added in the sector, and that's demonstrated actually on the right hand side. Ireland is moving up those rankings, but what's encouraging to me is what's potentially possible. So if Ireland is currently sitting where it is on that table, what can we do to force ourselves up there? Because from what I recall, like Belgium is achieving around 46 euros gross value added, where Ireland was about 23. So what can double what we're doing? So there's obviously opportunity for us to grow as an industry into that space, and that's why that's exciting, and that's why it's demanding and a challenge for us as an industry to obviously to respond to society's needs. Okay, so when we were given this mandate, and this is me working towards in the direction of what we're actually doing now, so that's kind of the background context. But when we were given this mandate, we went out and we engaged with industry to understand what their needs were, and we spoke to a number of companies that we would not have had relationships with in the past because they're domestically focused, or they're home builders, which we would have never dealt with in the past. And we also did a wider session with about 70 companies in a kind of a workshop mode to understand what were the pressing needs of the industry. Now, this was in October, and this was before energy and the labours or the materials issues have certainly become compounded from then. And when you speak to the industry, there is lots and lots of things that are challenging for them. Okay, so planning, utility connections, all of those types of external factors to a business, which is making their lives very difficult and constraining their ability to deliver units at the level that they'd like to. And that was well heard and well acknowledged from our conversations. But when we talk to businesses about, okay, what can you do as a business to expand your capacity without driving costs just astronomical? What can you try to achieve? Where's the pinch point for that? And labour came back time and time again as their constraint in that instance, but then modern methods of construction or off-site production came back as well as in as the solution, the answer, and I shouldn't say the be all and end all, but certainly something that would support that massive constraint that companies are facing around the labour piece of it. So time and time again, whether it's a home builder or a contractor, they came back to say, look, we need to do more off-site to alleviate labour challenges on site. So we listened to that, and that has become really a centerpiece of what we have launched to industry. Now, to support the adoption of modern methods of construction, we see that there's opportunities to increase productivity training, new technology tools, and then innovation in the actual offsite manufacturers themselves, which will drive that. So reflecting on that feedback, essentially what we undertook was to examine our existing suite of offers around productivity and innovation and amend those offers to make them relevant and applicable to the ask that we've been given. And that ask, just to remind you again from the previous slide, was to deliver productivity and innovation, but it was under the heading of achieving economic sustainability for the industry. So how do we deliver all of these new homes without just ratcheting cost way up? So what we've come up with or delivering, and there's just 3 more slides on this. On the innovation side, on the bottom of this slide here, you can see the selection of offers that we are now promoting to the domestic residential industry. These scale from an introductory offer of an innovation voucher all the way up to a much more significant package of supports, that's RD&I, research, development and innovation grants. The funding rates for these range from sort of 50% through to 25%, depending on the scale of the business and the nature of the activity that they're undertaking. But just to give you one example that or two actually examples that we're working on at the moment. So as I've talked about, increasing the use of offsite, but actually the pre-manufactured value. So how much is being done in the factory, again, reducing that site labor component is one of the things we're really interested in, and we've been talking to a lot of the systems manufacturers, and there's one of the companies, a timber frame company, who would have spoken about the issue around the availability of block layers, particularly on site, and how this was really a blockage for them and their clients in terms of getting work completed. So a potential solution to that is to be able to fit a cladding solution in the factory on the panel and ship that to site, and that cladding solution would obviously negate the need for block layers to do that external leaf. So how we're working with that company is, in that instance, in fact, they wanted to talk to an institute of technology, and what we could do in that instance is do an innovation partnership. So that's listed in the mid-size there, and that's in an instance where we can fund the researcher in third level to conduct that work for the company. And those packages, we can fund that actually up to 80%, and can be up to about €100,000 for those types of projects. The other example that comes to mind, and I think this is a really attractive one, is the exploring innovation example. So I was talking to a home builder recently about process innovation, I guess you'd call it, and they were talking about when they're speaking to their supply chain and getting deliveries and interacting with them, that just the complexity of the documentation that they receive, and that it's received in different formats, there's no templates, it's all sorts of different nature, like, scrolled up bits of paper delivered on site through to, very professional invoice and all that sort of stuff. And they said just the data processing of that is like a really problematic for them. And one of the things that we were looking at was, well, is there digital systems that you could develop to implement with your supply chain to capture that information more efficiently? So one of the things that we're looking at trying to do is promote the exploring innovation offer with that company. And what that is basically a company saying, we know we have a problem, but we don't understand how to fix that yet. So what we need to do is kind of pre-research. So our staff need to go out spending time talking to industry, talking to suppliers, maybe looking at international best practice to see how is this problem currently solved and fixed. And from there, then they may decide on a solution and decide to take it further into a research project, a more mid-sized one. And an example of the type of stuff we cover there, so we cover the percentage of the employees' time, the researchers' time on that, the employees in the company, I should say, or consultancy that's required to be brought in for that, as well as some travel and subsistence can be covered there. And the typical type of level that could be at. So we can do that up to 50% cover of costs, up to €35,000 in grant aid funding. Now, it doesn't have to be that size. It could be a much smaller project as well. You know, it could be sort of €10,000 of support that we're doing for a company as well, if that's all they need. But I think that's really attractive one for companies to start on that innovation journey. Okay. Now, then on the productivity side, so we looked at our lean and digital offerings to answer that productivity question. And we have a suite of them listed there, as you can see. So Lean Start, Digital Discovery through to Operational Excellence and Lean Transform. And in terms of just the again, just following on from the previous comments, the types of way we support companies. So often it is just this iterative growth that iterative complexity that we can support companies on. So often a company will come in and we'll talk to them to do a lean start first, and that's kind of a €6,300 project. It's 7 days of consultancy essentially, but that's to build out a wider plan. And then they might graduate from a lean start to a lean plus, and that could be a €100,000 project, which we'll cover 50% of, and that'll involve some consultancy, but also some training is what we like to see on that around lean within the company. And then up to a lean transform, which is where we're covering really extensive training across an organization and consultancy that goes with that. So what I'd say to companies is, and I think we hear this back from our clients, is that you start small, you prove out what you're trying to do, you see the results, and then you grow from there. And I feel that we have packages to support companies on that journey. So just around digitalization, which has definitely came up quite a lot on our industry consultations. One of the examples of a general contractor that we're talking to, and they were a good example of I think a company who's able to see the benefits of implementing digital systems. So this company, they in first instance, I suppose they believe that you need advanced levels of BIM and project management to deliver offsite solutions. So that's something that they felt was a requirement to be able to do that at the level required. But one of the interesting things that stuck with me from our conversation was how the implementation of project management software manifests itself in the delivery of quality on a project. So that company saw their snagging list really collapse through the use of this project management software, ultimately their subcontractor relationships being improved from their perspective. And they were able to quantify that in terms of the amount of time their snagging teams spent on site over the course of a year, which virtually eliminated their on-site snagging teams that were going around because of that. It was really just down to ad hoc stuff that could be done locally. So and they were able to put a euro amount against that as well and track it back as an ROI against the project management software. So that type of project is something we'd be delighted to work with companies on because we can see the productivity gain and the translation into the cost base of residential construction as a result of that. Okay, I'm going to finish with a mention around Clancy Construction. So I think these are a great case study for us as a company that we have worked with under the Build to Innovate initiative. So Clancy are a general contractor. They're domestically focused. They work in multiple different sectors, not just residential. They do really interesting stuff in healthcare and commercial as well. Not a company we'd had a relationship with in the past, as I mentioned. And as we're getting to know them, due to this new mandate that we have, really impressed by just how sophisticated the company is around digital innovation, process improvement, and just really, I think, the mindset of constant improvement that the business had was really encouraging and really good. And what we were able to work with the company on was their lean program. So Clancy have implemented the last planner system on a pilot basis on specific projects, and some of the clips there, the photos there you can see are just snippets of that type of stuff in terms of the site offices and the tools that they're using to support that last planner system. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the last planner system and more familiar than I am, but I have to say it's a methodology that we're hearing a lot more about in terms of just the frequency that it's coming up in our conversations with general contractors. And I think that's really encouraging, because I think people like Clancy would say that they've definitely seen the benefit of it and seen it quite quickly in terms of delivering the delivery of projects. So seeing it proliferate now across industry is really good. But from our perspective, look, supporting companies who are implementing that type of initiative on residential projects where there's going to be a productivity gain and ultimately a potential cost reduction or containment is really exciting in terms of the mandate that we've been given. And that is it from me, Susan. I was just going to say thank you to everybody for listening. I'd love to get questions because I'm sure I haven't been entirely clear on everything I've been saying. There is, in terms of like details of grant rates and all that sort of stuff, I'd hit our website up for that verbatim, to make sure that I'm not misleading you, because there is considerations around your company size and the applicable grant rate and all that sort of stuff. But more than happy to talk through the principles of what we're trying to achieve in further detail, or answer any other questions that the audience might have now.
Thanks, Ross. That was a very insightful presentation. We'll now move on to the Q&A. As I said before, if anyone has a question, just pop it into the question box and we'll ask Ross. There are a few questions in already. What is the ideal company for this initiative?
If you think about what we're trying to achieve is around impact on the costs of residential construction in Ireland. So companies who are doing that is definitely it. But we would be looking at, if I'm being honest, like our impact is going to be, because of that, most obvious in home builders, general contractors, and then offsite manufacturers of systems. That's where, if we can influence those companies to do things more efficiently, that has the biggest opportunity to impact the industry. Just in terms of strict criteria, we are still over 10 employees is a requirement of us. There is some stuff that the local enterprise office can do on this as well, though, such as agile innovation, as well as they have their lean for micro and stuff like that as well.
Okay, perfect. Do you have to be an existing Enterprise Ireland client, or does this program make more companies eligible to be Enterprise Ireland's clients?
You do not have to be an existing Enterprise Ireland client. That's the big new exciting thing about this. So we are onboarding companies as temporary Enterprise Ireland clients for the duration of this mandate, which we believe will be about 3 years, subject to review and so on and so forth. So yeah, we really want new clients from this. We're in a proactive business development mode for that. So yeah, really welcome inbound inquiries to myself or the built to innovate at enterprise-ireland.com. It's we're pretty easy to find online.
Okay, perfect. You may have answered this kind of in a couple of different points, but is there a contact list for Enterprise Ireland to speak to in each region to discuss grants, etc.?
If it's this initiative, it's me and my team that you should speak to. There is regional executives who traditionally they work with new companies to Enterprise Ireland, and they've, they're aware of this program as well, and some of them are working with us on it. But if you're in residential construction, or I should say it's at least 20% of your turnover, that's the other eligibility concern, is 20% is from residential. Yeah, come to us directly, and like typically what we're doing is we're getting inquiries into our inbox or wherever else. We have a quick triaging conversation with the company, and in some cases it's it's what we're trying to achieve and what they're trying to achieve down the line, and we'll quickly direct them to somewhere else or whatever else, or we're quickly moving on to, okay, there's something in this, let's try to flesh this out into a fundable project, basically. So that's the type of way we work.
Okay, perfect. Another question, if my business is moving into residential construction, would that be considered? I think you've answered, yeah, that.
Just to be even more open, so 20% is minimum requirement, but if you have a really strong plan to get to 20%, so maybe, because we're seeing this, which is really interesting actually, some product manufacturers are looking at moving more into residential because of the spend that's going into it. So they're saying, okay, well, I might be able to do an off-site version of my system, an off-site house version of my steel system or whatever else it might be. So if they come up with, like, it has to be believable and all the rest of it, business plan saying, look, we're moving into residential and we're going to head towards that minimum criteria, we can look at that.
Okay, so they can tailor it to fit your requirements.
Yeah. Look, we'll assess that plan and come up with a funding solution commensurate
Absolutely.
with that plan, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. Another question from an attendee: is there an opportunity for Irish construction technology companies to participate in this programme?
Yeah, there is, but it's where they fit into it. So I'm really keen to work with construction technology companies, and a lot of them are clients of ours, as a channel for us to get the word out on this. So we won't be able to fund a construction technology company directly out of this. It just doesn't fit directly. But what we can do is fund a general contractor or a specialist subcontractor to use that technology to get better. So often a company who is purchasing some sort of software tool, it's because of an overall productivity drive, and we may be able to build a grant aid plan, of which one of the components will be, say, the consultancy required to implement that software solution. So I have been talking to some of the construction technology companies about what this means to them, and I'd like to talk to more of them, because I think they need to understand what this could mean for them in terms of their business development. If it's relevant, they should be saying to companies they're talking to, go talk to Enterprise Ireland, because they could help you fund this initiative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. We're all out of questions, but do you have any final thoughts, just in case anyone is typing frantically just before we finish up? Do you have any final thoughts or final comments to say to the audience?
No, I think the easiest, I'm trying to get across the principles of what we're doing, and it's new to you, and it's new to us. So I think the really important thing is to try to remember, what are we trying to achieve as a agency of government, and what are we reporting on very regularly to Housing for All subcommittees, is around that piece. It's around the cost considerations of this plan, and how are we as an agency, through productivity and innovation supports, influencing companies on that agenda. And if you kind of understand that as a principle, that kind of flows through to a lot of the eligibility questions as well.
Okay, perfect. Sincere thanks again to Ross for today's webinar presentation. Pleasure. Please note that a copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. Information will be sent out shortly in relation to the next webinar. For information on this and other webinars, the annual conference, the annual book of cases, and other LCI resources, please visit leanconstructionireland.ie and follow the Lean Construction Ireland LinkedIn group page. Finally, thank you to everyone who attended today, and we very much look forward to meeting you at a future Lean Construction Ireland webinar. Have a lovely day. Thanks again, Ross. That was very interesting.
Thanks all. Cheers, guys.